Hey guys, this is DFD, aka Dark Frozen Devs, back with another Kamihime project video. Now, before I get into this, there's a few things I gotta mention. First off, I had forgotten about doing the challenges for the missions for the last event, so I did not record those. However, I do have another video I'm going to post, so consider that a replacement. But also, for those that are wondering about like some future content that happens later on, there's a very big one they did recently where it's a subtle change but has a very huge impact. Now, the Catastrophe fights, which is the Ultimate and the Ragnarok ones, as a lot of you should already know, they do not drop weapons aside from the Phantom weapons and only from the Ragnarok ones. They do drop SR weapons, but they're not really worth the Ultimate Catastrophes. That's changed later on. They drop SSR weapons that can also final break limit from all the Ultimate Catastrophes. They get their own sets of weapons that they'll drop. And just like the Phantom weapons, you can indeed trade them with raid medals. So it's going to be like a year later down the line, but that one small change is a very solid, like, practically any player should have a very decent grid at this point, because off the top of my head, the three weapons are Large Elaborate Small Assault, Large Defender Small Assault, and Large Assault Small Defender. So you'll be getting Assault regardless of what weapon you want, but at the same time, you will still get a decent amount of stuff. In fact, if you do plan on getting Medea and you're still around by then, there's two large elaborates that can go to skill level 30. If you have that, you have the maximum amount of elaborate that you'll need, because it will be 25% per elaborate weapon at skill level 30 by then. So you'll only get up to 50%, but that's the most weapons we'll be able to give you anyways, because you'll have to get the other 100% from buffs. It's weird how they set that up, but that's something to keep in mind later on. But the fact that they give a large assault that goes up to skill level 30, and you can grind it, that alone helps out as well. You should be able to get some very decent weapon grids later on, regardless of what player you are. So that's something to hopefully look forward to. It depends on how long the Nutaku version wants to last. I'm pretty sure the DMM side might last long enough. Sorry about that, my phone went off. But I'm pretty sure the DMM side should last long enough for that. There's that as well. So keep that in mind. It's something worth looking forward to. And I will definitely be staying updated on that one too, in case they didn't have any changes. Now, getting into the event itself, this is going to be a Water Advent reprint, which means it is a rerun of a previous event from before, and quite frankly, there's some stuff that could be worth and some stuff that isn't. It depends on what you need. And keep in mind that since it's an Advent, you need to be strong enough on your own in order to grind this event. It is recommended to be able to grind Ultimate, but if you can grind Expert, that is fine. If you are intending on getting some Final Break weapons, because some of them do need it, or especially the S-class souls, as in the 4th tier souls, and you plan on getting them, you have to do Ragnarok. You need the green orbs from that. So it is recommended to be able to clear Ultimate. If you are capable of clearing Expert, you still should be able to grind some weapons and whatnot. But preferably you want to be able to do Ragnarok for the S-rank souls. But anyways, going further into this is like a recommended list of what they have for different stuff you should probably go after. I agree with most of it, but there's some stuff I would possibly change, because definitely the SSR stuff does indeed have a very high priority. That's without a doubt. The only exception would be the SSR weapon that needs more materials for trade, because sometimes those aren't worth it. But in this case, from what I know from the weapons, all three SSR stuff is worth it, regardless of whether you want to put it on your grid or not. Because you can use SSR weapons for skill leveling if you don't intend on keeping them, and you can use SSR Dolans for Dolan orbs if you don't intend on keeping them. So this is the one time all three probably would be worth it. Also, any gacha ticket is high priority, not medium. They put premium and medium is high priority because these are free pulls. Do not pass up on free pulls, especially if it's the if you're a player that started later down the line and don't have all the SR Kamihime from the previous raid events. This is a chance to get some of them, because Epic Quests do indeed give some of those Kamihime as well, but we don't have every single Epic Quest that's ever been done, and then on top of that, Epic Quests never catch up with that stuff anyway. So, if you missed out on some of those Kamihime, there's your chance to get some of them. Something that I would change to medium priority is actually the Grimoires, because you will need them from a lot of stuff between break limits and getting final versions of weapons, also getting S rank souls. You will need books for a number of different things, but however, they still are medium priority because there's so many different sources to get them. We even have a permanent raid that drops them now, so I would say that's medium priority, not high. Things that are also considered medium priority, in my opinion, magic jewels, because granted, they are extra pulls, just like the gacha tickets. They're just not readily extra pulls, and you have to grind out quite a bit of stuff in order to get those. I would say they are the next priority below high. So that's a priority to go after you got all your high priority stuff. Also, soul points is dependent on whether or not you need them. Eventually, you should be swimming in soul points, because you'll hit a point where you just have nothing to spend them on, and then you can just stock them up, especially if you've been ranking up. So, soul points don't really have to do too much for, but they are there. There's up to 600. A lot of you early game players definitely ask about soul points a lot, so there's your chance. Also, I would put half elixirs possibly in there, because of the fact that it is more energy for you to do grinds and stuff, but those will also rack up depending on how much you spend them. There are players that go so hardcore that they actually run out of the stuff. Meanwhile, there's other players like me that actually have a surplus of it. So it depends on how often you use them. What I would knock from medium to low priority is actually the SR assault weapon, because quite frankly, you can get SR assault weapons from a lot of different places, and with so many SSR weapons available to any player, basically, you don't need to really go after them. So SR weapons are low priority, regardless of what it is. That's what I would say. But everything else I can agree with. The defender weapons low priority, the EXP spears is low priority. Generally, you want the SSR stuff first, the gacha tickets first, then the grimoires, depending on what you need, then the magic jewels, and then soul points and half elixirs, basically. That's what I would say for all that. But anyways, going into the event itself, because they usually lump all this text about the different the weapons and the SSR Dolan. It's easier to see it further down. But about the event itself, you do have to be specific rank in order to open up different stuff. The only one you truly have to worry about possibly ranking up for is Ragnarok, because you need to be rank 50 to open it. But the others are opened at some very early ranks. However, as far as I know, if you're going with advantage, you probably would need about, I would say, somewhere between 25,000 to 30,000 power before you can take on Ragnarok. It depends on how strong your grid is as well. If you have a lot of assault, you could probably do it with less. As for ultimate, 18,000, and then expert is generally around the I would say it's the same point as ultimate, just a little bit less, so like maybe 16,000, something like that. You don't need too much for expert and ultimate, to be quite honest. It really depends on what your weapon grid is, because if your grid's crap, then you're going to need a lot more power in order to be able to do that type of stuff. But you do need rank 50 for Ragnarok, keep that in mind. And it does limit you on 1 elixir per run, but preferably you want to go through this without using the elixir at all, because there's harder content you'll be able to do that with anyways at some point when you get strong enough. So try to save your elixirs if you can. If you're like really close to clearing it, then maybe you might want to use the elixir, but I would just try to avoid it altogether. Just make sure you're strong enough to do it. Now, As for the fights themselves, it's dependent on the difficulties, but the general layout's the same. Now, for expert, and I could even say ultimate as well because I remember this list, you will have to deal with a damage cut that the boss puts on itself the very first turn it does in the fight, and also again when her HP's below 50% or so. Now that is erasable. You can remove that damage cut, but if you're strong enough, you'll probably just overpower her anyways. So keep that in mind. But keep in mind, like, just remember you can remove the damage cut, and it will pop up twice. Now it's a 20% damage cut whenever she does it on expert. When on ultimate it's 25%, and I do believe it's 25% on Ragnarok as well. Now for both expert and ultimate, her attacks are basically the same, they just deal more damage, more or less. But normal burst, which is a true name for it, a lot of people say OD or overdrive or anything like that. Burst is an official canon name for it. But normal, it's 7 random hits of water damage. You really need to be careful if it hits one person a lot of times, because it will, if you're taking her on the recommended levels, you could see 1 or maybe even 2 people get wiped out off of it. I would say the normal one is the more dangerous one. However, the raging one is no slouch either, because it will hit everybody and also reduce their double attack rate. Combo rates getting reduced is a bit of a problem because it slows down how quickly you can use a full burst and whatnot. Plus, it's more damage in general because you're doing multiple hits. Double attack, on the other hand, though, is less detrimental than triple attack being reduced. However, going into Ragnarok, she does a lot more. It is still the 25% for the damage cut, but her random hits now go from 7 to 9 in Ragnarok, and it goes from a double attack reduction to a triple attack reduction for her raging move. So it definitely becomes a more dangerous fight then. Expert has 490,000 HP, Ultimate has 850,000 HP, and Ragnarok has almost 2.5 million. It's at 2,450,000. I don't really do anything about standard and beginner because of the simple fact that they are very, very easy, and quite frankly, a brand new player could probably hop in and clear those. So there's that. Now, this is a lot of stuff they recommend for the boss fight and go into much fuller details, but I've given a basic summary of it and what you probably need to worry about. It does recommend some different souls and whatnot, and I will say that if you do have a soul that gives defense or removes her damage cut, then they might be useful. If you have Kamihime that does it, then don't worry about it. But they do recommend Joan or Andromeda a lot. And then Mordred can remove buffs if you have her weapon. So there's that. But if you have her weapon, you're probably over leveled for Ragnarok anyway. So keep that in mind. And then on top of that too, you're definitely over leveled if you have any S-class souls. So remember that. They also recommended Shingen and Hercules. Honestly, any damage dealing soul, if you're going that route, will still work. So there you go. And a nice little trick too, if you do have a character that can draw all the attacks to herself, like literally do that without accessory effects or anything like that, because there's been some deals and whatnot where you may or may not have the 5th slot, but if you can draw attacks to one character and they can still be pretty tanky, have a good amount of defense and whatnot, you can use that as a strategy to deal with the normal burst as well, because that is a lot of hits that you're taking. So keep that in mind. Now, this part of the list is basically all the different stuff you may need and at different intervals and whatnot. You'll find that out in game. I will mention though, the hammer is much more useful than the gun for the SSR stuff, and the hammer just so happens to be the more expensive one. So keep that in mind. but it's the gun that can go in the final break. So for anybody that does intend on final breaking the gun, because there are occasionally people like that, remember to have some extra materials for that because you will need it. And then this Draconic Eye, they are good, especially for free players, but if you're trying to do some final breaks or going after an S-class soul, you probably won't be trading these green cores, so keep that in mind. But going into the stuff that's worthwhile, the SSR Dolan definitely is, regardless, because you can sell her for orbs, but those who plan on using her actually do get some good stuff from her. First and foremost, I have to say her attack power is horrible because it is not even 1300 without any sort of +1s or anything on her. So her attack power is going to be very low. She's not going to give you too much attack for your characters. Her HP is very high, actually. It's like almost 800. However, the main things about her, using her as a main Dolan, or even as a friend Dolan too, up to 50% water elemental attack. However, I say up to because just like the 140% Dolans, just like Monogarmer, just like Anubis, you have to match same element slots in your sub slots just like her. So if you intend on using her, make sure you have as many sub slots as possible with water Dolans, even if they have to be lower rarity. That will get the most out of her and really spike your damage output up. Also, summoning her mid-fight, it is one character that gets it randomly. However, they will ignore all damage for basically one hit. I don't know if multiple hits will count. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. The game is a little bit weird like that. But just know that if you're going to take a strong nuke and know it does only one hit, summoning her before that can possibly protect somebody. So there's that. It's very helpful if it turns out, okay, your character that can draw all those attacks to herself is the one that gets that buff. It's still random, so keep that in mind. But the gun, it is medium defender and small rush. That's why I say it's not really worth it too much, because the defender's fine. Rush is definitely a weapon skill that you really shouldn't have to go after. It's just the fact that this gun can final break, so that can actually get you a decent amount of defender, like 18%. So it's honestly, it's up to whoever if they want to use that weapon, but personally I don't recommend it. And keep in mind that if you do intend on using it, then you do need to have some extra materials in order to final break it. So keep that in mind. But I still say, regardless of whether you're using it or not, grab it anyways, because SSR weapons give a good amount of skill experience. So use it as skill leveling fodder if you don't intend on using it. The hammer is the better one to use. It is large assault, small defender. However, it does not final break. So this will possibly end up being a placeholder weapon. However, hammer grid is also pretty good, so it's quite useful for that as well. So keep that in mind. But the fact that it doesn't final break does hold it back quite a bit, because that would be a very good skill combination. And then if it was able to final break, the small defender would probably turn into medium. But sadly, it's not final breaking, so you're only getting 16% assault and 10% defender. That's just off the top of my head because I've memorized a lot of weapon skills. But the SR stuff, not worth, in my opinion. But if you are trying to get a glaive thing for water, then there's an assault weapon for it. It's just try not to use too many SR weapons for that. Maybe one or two, just to replace some of the slots that's missing. But other than that, I wouldn't say it's worth. And of course, the water axe, not worth at all. If you're that desperate for water axes, just grind the Guardian Ophiel. She's a water guardian. She drops a very good axe. Much, much better than this one. So, there's that. And for those that are doing the mission, Wind Element is the one to go for ultimate. And of course, you have to do it with certain rarities. If you're trying to do all the missions, basically, Expert has to have SR or lower Kamihime. Ultimate, if you're trying to do it with as little runs as possible, go with a full team of Wind or Kamihime and just do it from there. And Ragnarok does not need rarities, but they do want you to clear it without an elixir, so there's that. And naturally, you want to clear Expert and Ultimate without an elixir either. So there's those. That's how you get that type of stuff. And generally, it's extra materials, but of course, there's a Draconic Eye Shard in the mix of this. That's why it's recommended to always do these missions. So, and they're not too hard too once you get strong enough. So there's that. But anyways, that's all for this. Again, I would easily recommend the Dolan, even though she has low attack power. The hammer also is pretty useful if you decide to go after it. And as far as it goes with the gun, if you want my honest opinion, the gun is utter crap because of how the skills line up. But it doesn't mean it's useless. It can have its uses, even if it has to be skill leveling fodder. So still get the gun. Get the gun, but you may not use it for your weapon grid. But anyways, that's all for this. More is going to come soon, and definitely not more of this event because I've over-leveled for advent events, even doing the elemental R Hime missions and all that. I've over-leveled all my elemental teams for events, so I don't bother trying to record anything about the advent events aside from these discussion videos, so don't expect me to show a gameplay one of it. Sadly, that's just how it is at this point. Because there's not too much I can really do unless I just massively gimp myself, like taking off weapons or something like that. I just don't go out my way for it. And then I also have Medea. She can just solo everything on her own, literally. She is that powerful. So that's why I don't really bother to try and record any gameplay of advent events anymore. That will change, however, because on DMM side, they did give extra difficulties to events. So that will change when that happens. Until then, sorry, I'm just not going to bother recording any gameplay of the advent events. The raid events is different, though, because that one, I can still show something that can put up a reasonably good fight against some of the stuff I have. And still win, of course, I can still beat it. But that's how it is. But anyways, that's all for this. And look forward to the extra video I'm going to have as a replacement for not recording the last raid event, so there's that. But anyways, that's all for now, guys. Take care.